Gloria to Alton.
Yes, Gloria.
Can you run over to 590 and help me get a backup?
Okay, I'll be right over.
Ariana to Gloria. Go to Ariana. Where are you now? I'm at 590 in the program room.
And it's not. Yeah. Is that what kids are chatting? Nobody. That must be council. That's
Yeah, I should have told her, like, she's not.
Oh, right.
She was our she's looks straight to me. I'm like,
okay. Fair enough. Fair enough.
I think they might not. Yeah, I don't, I mean,
Oh my God. We're excited next year.
Yeah, I know.
Way back.
Yeah, no, we're all together. My type.
Your ranking statistics.
This one is the light The spacing of the boys was not like. So you're committed. Yeah, it was always. Well, you've been in it for a while. Yeah. Like. Yeah. I'm really sad, you know, I understand his need to go when
Come out here in a little car. Little plastic car. I have one of those. It's where he says, when the guy was in here and he told us what mine said. Excellent. That's why so much time gets. Trying to make me nervous here, getting close. I heard you love presents. You should be excited about
not so optimistic talk down the hall. Thank you for joining us. My name is Lori Strickland, and I'm the Electronic Services Librarian at Villanova University School of Law. And with me today is my colleague.
I'm Benjamin Carlson. I'm the Emerging Technologies Librarian at Villanova.
And we're here talking to you today because Villanova has done a lot of digital initiatives in the past year. A lot of big projects, and we wanted to come talk to you about the experiences we had as we moved through those projects, give you some tips and maybe some pitfalls that you won't fall into that we did and learn from, but nonetheless, if you can avoid them, it's better to do that. So our topic today, how to steer with 20 hands on the wheel, tech tools that guide and stimulate collaboration. Just to give you the big picture here, yes, it's a steering wheel. And there are, in fact, 14 hands instead of the 20 in our title, but 20 just seems way too cluttered. But for big projects like this, you need lots of hands on the wheel. They're basically like those giant trucker wheels, where you'll just keep turning and turning and turning if you only have 2 hands to do it. You need to reach out to others in your department and to people from other departments to help you steer that wheel in the right direction. So we kind of fell into the digital projects that we started this year in a number of different ways, and we'll talk about that. one reason we really got into them is because we got a new director who is very forward-thinking and wanted to really get involved in a lot of digital projects. And most of this was in response to some of the budget issues that libraries and law schools are facing all across the country. Unfortunately, the library is often a target for budget cuts. It seems unfair. There's a couple reasons why we often end up being on the chopping block. The first one being that we're not a profit center. We don't make money. That's pretty clear, right? Unfortunately, we don't get the big donors. People aren't quite as keen to sponsor a library collection as they are to name a dining room or something along those lines. So we don't really bring in money. And in fact, another reason we're a target is because we have these big, juicy budgets. They're like a giant peach on the tree that the financial directors just want to pick and take a piece of. They see our materials budget, they see these giant numbers, here's a place we can cut, here's a place we can save money. And unfortunately, much of the administration sees us as someone who doesn't bring in money, someone who spends barrels of money. And unfortunately, that combines with a third reason why we're a target, and that's because most people in law school, most of the administration, other departments really have no idea what law libraries do. They see us as a place that houses books. We check books out to them. Maybe they know we have some online databases for them to use, but they're really not aware of the services that we provide, services to support teaching, student learning, and other resources like that. So fortunately, these three things all kind of combined to put us on the chopping block. And there are ways that we can get these targets off of our backs. Rather, we can make sure that we do some things to make that happen.
Yeah, so one of the big things that's kind of a theme of these projects and why we're doing it is that we're trying to raise our profile in law schools. Lori said there are a lot of issues with visibility, with people knowing what we're a service for, and we need to reach out to the law school in general. So raising our profile, our goal is to become kind of the go-to department within the law school for developing and kind of leading the charge on digital projects. Obviously, IT would be heavily involved in that too, because we don't have all the technical expertise, but because we were good liaisons and we work well with the various departments, it was a natural fit for us to step in and be heavily involved in these new digital projects. And that goes hand in hand with the fact that we didn't want to be seen as just book holders. We didn't want to hide behind our books. We wanted instead to kind of get out there and say, look, we have all kinds of skills and expertise and opportunities that you can take advantage of. When I say you, I mean every department in the law school has some way to interface with us in these projects. So that was kind of the first main goal here.
So next we realized that what we needed to do was identify key stakeholders. And by stakeholders, I mean people who need to be involved in a project. People like the dean, others in administration who have to give approval, who might be responsible for giving you the budget, the money you need to bring the project along. Those who have to be part of the project in terms of giving their input and the fact that it impacts them. In addition to identifying those stakeholders, those people you have to seek approval from, you also want to get involved with others in your law school, other departments, and if I can paraphrase from the Hunger Games, if you want to survive, you have to make friends. And these friends are not the people who need to be involved in the project because they have a stake in it. They're involved in it because they want to be involved in it, because they have skills and attributes that are helpful to you. They're people like IT, maybe marketing departments, other departments within your law school that you can reach out to. You want to build relationships with them so that when you start these projects, you can say, hey, could I possibly rely on you for your expertise in this area? And they'll be willing to jump in and help. So identify your stakeholders, raise your profile, and make friends with the three things we kept in mind as we jumped into our first big digital project. So we decided that the best way to start would be to set some goals for ourselves for our first project. And that basically meant that we wanted to identify an unmet need, something that the law school just wasn't taking care of at this point. We wanted to start small, something that was little enough that we could get control over it with a limited number of players. We wouldn't have to reach out to departments all over the place. And then we also wanted something that was no cost or low cost, because free is much easier to justify than finding $1,000. So the lower the cost, the better. And then we also wanted to reach out to other departments with expertise, relying on those friends that we tried to make in the last year.
So let it not say we are not committed to a metaphor. We decided to take the Cali theme and run with it. So we are comparing these projects to successive road trips because we have to know with this collaboration what we're comfortable, how far we're comfortable going with these people. So just to get started, we call this our day trip. We'd be going from Philly to Pittsburgh. This was our first project. This was a small project, getting our feet wet, kind of getting an idea of what we could handle and what kind of collaboration we could start fostering with other departments. Specifically, what happened was the Villanova created a new sports law center, and they needed a website. And for various reasons, we couldn't just tack it onto our current website, so there was an initiative to develop a website specifically for the sports law center. And at first it was just going to be a WordPress site. But that still takes a lot of planning, especially considering the number of players involved. So there was an unmet need. There was very little staff, newly formed department. Basically one director and a bunch of students were involved, and us. Again, as I said, those were the only real players involved. There were 2 sets of student groups. There were some student bloggers and then the Sports Law Journal. And we had to coordinate them all at the same time. There was really not much budget for this. It was just basically setting up the infrastructure, but there was, we weren't hiring any new people to create this. And we had to involve University IT at the basic level. We now use University IT for everything instead of having our own department at the law school. So the main challenges, I think I've gone over some of them, but really getting everyone interested. I'm going to go back to this theme a lot. These collaboration projects do not get off the ground unless people are really interested up front in the project. And there's a few ways we do that. That's specifically related to the tools we're going to get to later. Especially coordinating duties. This is another big one. How do we allocate duties? How do we say you're responsible for these parts of the project, you're responsible for these? And finding a way to map that out so that everybody can see it at the same time. Finally, we wanted to minimize our involvement. We wanted to do it, set it up, and then create the structure, and then hand it off to the people who are actually going to be creating the content here. So the plan was, we needed to create a demo of this product as early as possible. We wanted to make sure everybody involved, to get excited, knew exactly what they were going to be contributing to. So they could make comments early. They could say, I don't like this. I need this to move over here. I need this to be more prominent. Like getting a demo up of this website early was so important to us. To make a mock-up, there are a few options. Generally, when we worked with IT, they would create mock-ups in Photoshop. WordPress itself is a good example of something you can make mock-ups in. And I'm going to get back to this in a little bit, but PowerPoint ended up being the most useful tool for a really easy mock-up. It wasn't perfect, but PowerPoint, more than a lot of other tools, really allow you to move elements around, and it doesn't take a lot of expertise. Most of the people in the law school knew how to use it up front. On the planning end, we had to figure out the organization. And we had to figure out how the actual pages on the website were going to be organized. So we used a product called Mindomo, which is mind mapping software. And again, I'm going to demo that a little bit later and show how we actually used it to map out websites. So as I said, with creating a mock-up, to go back to our metaphor, showing off the destination, if we're doing a road trip, it's so important to show them where they're going. This is the Andy Warhol Museum, since we're going to Pittsburgh. But the idea is really, nothing gets somebody more excited about getting involved like actually seeing where they're going. So finally, in terms of what we learned, we had to identify everybody up front who needed to be involved, figure out everybody's responsibilities so that we could hand it off to the correct people. Assessing everybody's technical know-how. It turned out our director was not very good with technical technology, but we had a lot of students who were, so I was able to allocate a lot more duties to the students, whereas the director, we had to do a little bit more hand-holding up front. And then in finding ways to hand over control and showing them the mock-up up front. So that really was our first main project in this.
So to continue the road trip analogy, we basically made this short day trip. You know, we figured out who we could stand being in the car with for several hours, you know, what diner had the best pancakes, what scenic detours we could never, ever take again. And we moved on. We were ready to start a new project. We went back to see what else we could do. So our second project, we're calling this one the Joys of Interstate Travel because it was a longer project, much more involved than our short trip to Pittsburgh with the Sports Center site. So we decided to create a digital repository for the law school. This differed from the sports law site in several ways. One being that this wasn't an unmet need, but it's one that the administration didn't even know that they had. So we had to go to them and convince them that the law school really does need a space where we can archive all of our materials. And we were prepared for them to come back and say, well, we've had them in boxes sitting up, you know, in the library tech services department for years. That seems to be working for us. Why do we need this? So what we really had to do was convince them that, yes, this is going to be a larger project. It's going to encompass all the law school stuff. We want to capture as many digital materials that are being produced now as we can to put into the archives, as well as going back and digitizing those others. But we really needed a nice hook to pull them in. And so that hook became the Sports Law Center. We just created this website for them. We're expecting that they will generate lots of materials. There will be symposium, videos, you know, all sorts of papers that they will issue. We need a space to store those. We don't have a place set aside other than that great website that Ben worked on. It's really not a place to archive those materials. What are we going to do? We can't let all these great things just languish somewhere in a box. So with that in mind, we talked to our university IT, and since storage was the issue, we had actually just, as Ben mentioned, consolidated our IT services, which meant consolidating our servers. So now our servers were living elsewhere, and in fact moving them to a cloud. And we began to worry, where are we going to be able to store these videos? Are there going to be issues with long-term archiving of these materials? And so our solution was to set up a digital commons site, and we actually got IT to pay for it based on these storage issues, saying, hey, you guys don't have to maintain the servers that have this information on it. You don't have to worry about, you know, transferring the format of videos. We'll take care of all that for you if you buy us this fancy tool to do it. And they thankfully stepped up and said, yes, we will do it. So we got that in place. So while it's not free software, we were able to work around that and get it for free for our law school. And one other challenge of this project was a little bit different from the Sports Law Center. Yes, we did have relationships with the students and the director of the center, but here we really had to work with more extensively with university IT in terms of having them build mock-ups for us, and then also working with the vendor. We ultimately went with Digital Commons from VPress because of ease of use. So we had to kind of be the go-between between what VPress needed, mock-ups to look like, and the mock-ups that IT was giving us. So we kind of had to work with those groups. Of course, there were bumps in the road, as there are with any project. As I said, we had to act as the go-between for the vendor and university IT, and stuff didn't always translate. We thought we knew exactly what VPress needed us to do. We'd go to IT, they would give us a product, we'd send it back, and well, maybe that wasn't quite what we were supposed to do, and we repeat the process. But we learned. Every time we did that, we learned you know, what we needed to do and became better at communicating between the two groups. We also discovered that what we really needed was flexibility. Flexibility in terms of what collections we were going to put up into the digital repository first. Because we had said, remember our hook that we went to the administration with was, we're going to put our sports law materials in here. We're going to have this great sports law archive. The problem was the center was so new, we didn't have anything. They had a couple of blog posts. They hadn't yet held their first symposia. It's really hard to have a collection if you don't have stuff to put in it. So we had this new digital commons repository, we were live, we needed stuff in there. So we went back to, okay, well, we're going to put all of that stuff that's in the archives in there. We could get started on that. Well, that involved buying a new scanner. that could accommodate the size material that we had. And then we started having conversations about how are we going to tag this data? What metadata are we going to use? How are we going to organize the collection? And we realized that that is a huge task. And maybe starting with that as our first collection just wasn't going to work. So we took another step back and we said, what can we start with following the plan that we had with the Sports Law website? What's small enough and concrete enough that we can start with and feel that we've had a sense of completion when it's done? So what we ended up doing was selecting our law school journals, our back issues, and putting those online first. It was something that required a little bit of automation to get it up there, but it was a much more discrete set of information to deal with. It was much easier to get that up there than moving on to some of the other collections. So it wasn't what we thought we would do first, but it's really what worked out in the end as our first collection. We also really had to balance this project with other priorities. We teach, and we also were working on the Sports Law site, and was still updating that. And then we also started working on the law school website, which is our third project we'll talk to you about. So it became a lot of, what can we do when? Uploading those journals was something that we could do whenever we had a few extra seconds, or I should say Ben could do when he had a few extra seconds, and was able to add those journals up on the site pretty easily. And then finally, we had to identify ways to grow the project in the future. As I said, we were really excited about getting those archives up there, but that's something that we've sort of put off as a little bit further down the road, but we've started talking about how we're going to do this. We did buy the scanner. We started working with folks in tech services to help us get those materials scanned and ready and stored for us. We started having conversations with IT about setting up media drives and the like to house those materials until we're ready to put them up there. So we started laying the groundwork while we're working on the other collections, just sort of thinking ahead, what are we going to do with this in the future?
So technologically, the challenges for this project were a lot different from the Sports Law Center in that we were not on the front end working with different departments as much as we were working directly with IT as we had to first convince them that this was a viable and useful product to purchase, because again we got them to fund the majority of the project. And we had to do that again with mock-ups, with our own mock-ups, with Prez's help, with examples of other very useful and successful repositories from other schools. And with a little bit of work, we eventually got them excited about the project. On the back end, the problem was getting all the information in there. While I handled a lot of the direct uploading of metadata and PDFs and everything to the repository, there was a lot of work that had to be done. We had to bring in a number of research assistants and find out how much they could handle as far as coming up with subject tags for all of our journal articles. And so that was the kind of the limit of what we used technologically on that project, although I'm going to talk a little bit about future plans for the repository as well, because that's where a lot more collaboration is going to come into play. Being flexible, again, was so important. This project involved a lot of very, very specific moving parts that we couldn't actually control the deadlines on. So we had to make sure that they were on the same page with us. Getting the word out was also extremely important. We didn't know who was going to have the best suggestions.
Well, basically getting the word out, we ended up talking to faculty. We were also worried about when do we start publicizing the Digital Commons repository. We only have the journals collection up there right now. We haven't really started adding a lot. Is it going to generate enough excitement to show them something that is just in its infant stages? But we actually had a library update with our faculty recently, and we mentioned it. We showed the repository, and we got some great ideas. One faculty member suggested having a basic junk drawer where they could upload documents that they want to link to from their blog post, someplace where those documents could live forever, even if the site they originally got them from might disappear. So we thought that was a great idea, and that's another collection that we have in the works. But you just never know where you're going to get a couple good ideas from.
Yeah, one of the big parts of this project was getting an intern, which is actually this summer, but again, coordinating the help with this project, coordinating help on the back end, it was much more important for the collaboration, so that once we get a successful repository, we'll be able to market it to our various departments. But that was an important lesson with this, because it was a much more significant project than what we had done before. And again, with any project like this where there are a lot of materials, tagging and metadata were so important. And we had to do it early because we didn't want to have to assign somebody to go back in later on and add a bunch of tags. It was much easier to do it on the front end when we could batch upload everything.
Right, and we kind of learned that as we went through the journal upload process, because we were starting to think about the tags. And so I think we'll be much more prepared with the other collections to have a list of tags in mind, or at least a list of basic subjects in mind, before we start actually uploading information to the repository.
Right, and so I mentioned future plans for the project before, and again, once we had it successfully up and running with all of our articles, that was the key. Once we could now market a thing, and again, getting people excited, always the key first step here. So once we had something we could show off, and show off how many downloads we were getting, show off some analytics, we were able to move to the next step and start getting other people involved, see what ideas they have people suggest to us, oh, I want to use it this way, I want to use it this way, and that was a great start. And then our other plan is we've got a whole bunch of print archives that we need to get digitized. Lori mentioned this project that we haven't really gotten started on because we needed something up as an initial project. So we're now working with everybody who needs archives, alumni needs archives, all kinds of stuff that can be helpful to communications. And the idea is that we're going to reach out to them with this project and have a resource for everybody to draw on.
Right, and in terms of, you never know where the ideas might come from. We'll talk about our website project in just a second, but when we started meeting with the individual departments, some conversations with them, they actually came up with some ideas of maybe collections that we could put in the repository rather than items that had previously been archived on the website. So it was some ideas that came out of a different project, but you just never know. Be open to them, talk to people as much as you can, and help them imagine where they can put their items and how they can really make the repository their own as well. So we took our short trip. We went across interstate lines. It's okay, we all came back in one piece. We learned a lot. We were ready to head out on a longer trip, and I do mean longer. We started the website project maybe over a year ago, something along the lines of 15 months, and we are hoping to finish that up this summer. But it has been a long journey. Just in case you're wondering. The law school website redesign. Now, this was something that we started. It's a large-scale project. Talk about visibility. The website is the face of the law school. Everybody in the outside world, this is where they come to first to learn about Villanova. So it was really important for us that we get involved in this project and take a lead role in terms of determining the design and working with the different groups. So it's not just a library project. We're not focusing just on our web pages, but the web pages for the entire law school. It was also something with a fixed deadline. We talked about the deadlines for the digital repository project. The ones for the website are even more strict. Because again, we're working around university IT schedules along with our schedule and the schedules of all the departments that are involved, which meant that it had to be something that was going to be worked on over the summer primarily, and that we would have a start date, a go live date for the website before the students return for a new semester. We talked about this in the planning stages. We decided we didn't want to do a website change mid-year because nobody really has time to work on it then. It would be confusing for incoming students who've gotten used to the website to now switch to something completely different. So that really dictated our timing. We had very strict deadlines that we had to meet. We couldn't push this aside to work on other projects. So, some of the things we wanted to do with the digital repository, we had to put on the back burner until we got this website project finished. And that was a little hard for us because we were excited about the digital repository. We wanted to do a lot with it, but we just had to set it aside for a higher priority project. We also had less freedom in the design process with this project than we did with the digital repository. With the digital repository, we worked a lot with the programmers to design our front page for the repository and our headers, the images that we used. With the website, it's a little bit different. There are a lot of other groups involved. We had to run a lot of materials by the dean. We had to get approval on all of our mock-ups for the front page. We had to run stuff by University Communications, because again, they're the folks who are putting the stamp of approval on everything that's going out to the public. So they had to make sure that we were meeting their guidelines and doing things the way they wanted them to be done. We also found that we had to run things by our university development folks. Things like, referring to named spaces within the law school on the website, that there's a whole protocol as to how you're supposed to refer to those. So things that we didn't really anticipate before we got started, but we realized that there are so many groups that you have to run your mock-ups by to get approval from. And you may not know where they come from. You kind of discover that as you go through it. And it does sometimes slow the process down, and that can be a bit of a challenge when you're trying to meet those strict deadlines. Speaking of challenges.
So yeah, there were a lot of people involved, over 25 people, many departments, many different interests. So again, going back to my excitement, again, that's the theme for me, was getting everybody excited up front, because we needed everybody to contribute. Everybody was involved in this website. It was gonna change one way or another, whether they liked it or not. So we had to make sure they were excited in actually updating their content. And so, busy schedules was number one. That was mostly Lori handling all that.
Yeah, looking at 25 different Outlook calendars just made my head explode. Trying to find that 1 hour of time when everybody was in the state and able to come and sit down and have a meeting was a nightmare. We eventually ended up, we'll talk about this a little bit later, but using different shared calendars to try to work that out. But yes, definitely coordinating everyone was quite a problem.
Again, 25 different opinions, especially in the early stages when we were just showing everybody mock-ups. People didn't like it because people don't like stuff often. It was a very difficult process of getting everybody to agree that this is maybe not the perfect thing that you would want, but everybody finally kind of came to a mini consensus on how the homepage and the content pages were going to look. And that took quite a while to figure out.
Quite a bit of give and take on that one.
And then allocating responsibilities, again, so key. We had to figure out who's responsible for which pages. There were over 100 pages involved, maybe 200 even. So, and each one of those had to be assigned to a person. We didn't want any orphan pages or anything to fall out of being updated, because that was a problem we're having on our current site. So we had to make sure that everything was streamlined up front so that everybody knew their responsibilities and was comfortable with them at the start.
And that took some doing as well, working with these folks to actually help them figure out what their responsibilities were. Because we had a lot of staff changes and departments that had merged or consolidated and just had changed overall. So we were actually helping people figure out what was part of their jobs. And people said, well, that's not really my page. You go to another group, that's not my page either. And then it was a matter of trying to figure out, well, who ultimately should be responsible for this content? Because it's not going to be us. We don't know anything about admissions and alumni relations. That's not our area of expertise. So that really took a little bit of time to figure out who was responsible for each of the pages.
And as I mentioned before, some people wanted our old website because it works, it's fine. Why are we changing? Why are you dumping all this new work on us? And honestly, part of the answer was it doesn't matter if you like the website because it's changing one way or another. It was time for it to change. There were a lot of problems with it. But one of our main challenges was convincing people that there was a good reason to update, that there was a nicer looking website in the horizon, and that it would allow everybody to revise their content and create a more streamlined face to the world.
And one of the reasons for that was also a budget consideration. We were paying this outside group to maintain this site. And in fact, now we're merged with University IT. They have a very talented group of web programmers that we could draw upon. And since we have personal relationships with them, whenever there's something we want changed, or if we decide we don't like the look of the page, and it's not something we have control over, we can go talk to them. They can, fix it in a day, 2 days, 3 days, and we don't have to wait 3 weeks for this outside vendor to get back to us with those changes that we need. So so they were a little bit more open to that. We also showed them that the new system was easier to use, so those that were using the old system saw it and said, wow, yeah, you just click and drag things, that's great. So once they saw that it was actually easier than what they had been using, a lot of people started to buy in that way.
Again, this was a long project. We started work on this last summer. That was before I even got there. The project was set in motion. So people were aware of the various stages of this. And involvement has really picked up in the last few months. But at every stage, we need to make sure that people are thinking about this. Because there were a lot of large-scale changes that needed to happen. And if people weren't thinking about the changes, then they probably wouldn't spend a lot of time working on them at the last minute.
So really for us, it was about setting goals for them. You know, we say this project's going to take a year and a half. People will wait till 3 months before to really start thinking about it. So we set goals in between. Okay, well, we're going to have training on mind mapping software, which Ben will go over, on this date. And you'll be responsible for putting your pages into that software by this date. And so we found that if we did a succession of goals, people were much more likely to be involved. They had something concrete to do to move the project forward. We also found that it was useful to follow up with them and have individual conversations, send them emails, how are things going, what can we do, do you have any questions, so that they really felt like they were involved in the process and that their opinions really mattered. Because this was their website, and we told them throughout the process, we invited all of you to join us. We don't want this to be a small committee-driven project. We want it to be everybody who's involved. Every department uses the library website, or the law school website. Every department uses it for a different reason. We don't know why you sometimes need pages that you need up there. It's up to you to tell us to make sure that we're serving your needs. So we tried to involve them as much as we could. And then we also sent them mock-ups and samples so that they could get excited about that, see what it was going to look like. And then also we're experimenting with sending them examples of completed pages so that they can get inspired by their colleagues. Wow, I really like what financial aid did with that chart. I would have put something like that on my site too. So that has helped out as well.
This is Lori picked this picture. It's one of my favorites, but very important to get a sense of what the tech abilities are, everybody involved, and it's probably going to be low for a lot of the people. These are not people who specialize in technology. And so it helped to have that we had a really good CMS, the new one, and it was easy to demo to them. But it's also something you need to work around up front. The levels of technology expertise vary quite widely in law school staff. Some people are really excited with a new tool and they want to play with it. Some people are like, even if it's easy to use, I don't want to touch it. So it's something to assess up front. Even keep a chart of your impressions of how comfortable everybody seems, or do a survey or something like that to get a sense up front. So, in order to get these various challenges, in order to overcome these various challenges, we really had to think about ways to involve everybody, get tools that people could access or that we could access to help us move everything along. Lori was heavily involved with shared calendars, and we used Outlook primarily for that.
Right, everybody had it on their computers, they were already familiar with it, it was very easy for me to send them invitations. And in fact, when we set up individual department trainings, we just blocked off periods of time for training. They would just go in, put their name in, and then we knew to go ahead and block off that section of our schedule. So it was very easy, it was a way for people to go ahead and find something that worked with their schedule without me sending a million emails. How does next week look for you? Or Tuesday between 2 and 4? It just really streamlined the process. And it's something very simple, but it really worked for us.
So these are basically the tools I'm going to talk about. So I'm just going to get right into this, into how do we get people excited. It's the last time I'm going to harp on this, but again, I cannot stress enough how important it is to get people excited. I think some of you are getting the reference of the picture, so that's enough for me. More than any other project for this one, people needed to see what the website was going to look like. They needed to see not only so that they knew why this was an important tool, an important website upgrade to make, but also so that they had an idea of where their content was going to go. We tried to, as early as possible, try to say what their layouts could look like so that they had an idea. Basically, most of our current websites had big walls of text, and we were trying to discourage that, and as well as discourage one or two lines of text on the page, and instead we're encouraging them to think of new ways to represent their content. Once in a while I would get a very professional looking mock-up of almost exactly what it was going to look like from IT. And we would certainly pass these on to people, but the problem we encountered with really sleek ones was that we couldn't update them quickly. So when people gave us comments and we brought them back, they would say, okay, we'll take these comments into under advisement, we'll get you another mock-up in a week, which didn't really work for us. So we wanted something a little bit more simple for layout stuff that would help us make an easy to understand mock-up that could be easily changed. So what I used for a couple of projects was just to give you an example of what we were talking about. For the library page, we decided we had a header, and we knew what kinds of components we were able to work with, and so we talked to a lot. We made a working group from the library staff, and we said, hey, let's just put one of these together real quick so that we know basically where we want to put stuff. Layout-wise, it was so easy to say, I don't necessarily want students here, I want to move it around. Or we could take text boxes and move them around. We could take columns. We could rearrange Westlaw if we didn't like them that day, and then put Lexis up front. But again, real quick, we could just compartmentalize the different components on the page and move them around. And we found that in small working groups, that was a really nice way to just collaborate on this stuff. And we encourage everybody else to do it as well. And so that, along with the mock-ups that we were getting from IT, I think really did get people involved in the process. The second major component was figuring out how to map this stuff out. We had to get a good sense of what the pages were going to look like. We had over 100 pages at least representing all the content on the website. So not only do we have to figure out what does the website look like now, how is it organized, is there any major problems with it? It's hard to tell when you're just in the website. You can usually pull up the site map, but even then, you can't get a sense of everything going on. So we wanted to map out the current site and have some tool that would allow us to quickly move stuff around and give us ideas for how the new site should look, how we could streamline it. Also, it had to be clear, it had to be pleasing to the eye, and it had to be something everybody could use collaboratively. So that's where we decided to try a mind mapping tool. The one we chose is called Mindomo, but mind mapping tools are generally used for concept. How are concepts related to one another? And usually represented by symbols and arrows. So it really worked well to just instead use it to represent a website. So page relations were clear. We could add some certain amounts of content to show what each page would have on it. And again, we chose a specific one, Mindomo. There are many, many mind mapping tools that get high ratings online. So I'm not advocating for Mindomo specifically, but I can show how we used it. It is an easy to use. It's fairly inexpensive, cloud-based, web-based, and straightforward tool. It was nice that nobody had to install anything. We could just add people to it. The academic subscription is about $36 a year, and you don't even need one to be on there. But there were some extra perks that we had a few academic subscriptions in there to manage a lot of these maps. So I'm going to quickly show off a project we did with Mindomo. You might not be able to see anything there, but I will narrate everything. This is a map that we created of the current Villanova website. All the page relations we just took from actually this is just the library, I believe. So just to show off the relations of the pages on the library's website, and we found a few things just off the bat. These lines I created in between these pages here, these are green lines and they represent relationships. And here it just means this page is the same as this page. And we found out that there was a student section over here that had links that were all copied over from the About the Library, and it didn't really make any sense why we were doing that. A number of other things stuck out to us. You can see it was fairly easy for me to add all these images to it, so it was nice if you know what images you would add to a page, you can just put it right up there. There's a Google search embedded directly in the software. You can add videos. You can also make this a project management tool. I can assign anybody I want to a particular one of these pages. And you know, it's not the most robust tool in the world. We didn't want to go for something highly specialized because then usability might have been an issue. And this, again, is fairly easy to mess with. I can move stuff around. Again, I can take the hours page and make it a sub-page of visiting the library, and then it is a quick and very visually appealing way of representing how the pages look. One other thing we looked into was I've got these numbers next to a few. We can assign priorities to the pages. Let's say I went through Google Analytics and found out the traffic of each page. I can use these numbers quickly to just show off which are the most popular pages, and we can make reordering based on that. And again, everybody can get involved with this. People can work on this at the same time. As with all cloud stuff like that, it can be a little bit wonky when people are messing with the same project simultaneously, but it does work. And it's as flexible as you want it to be. Again, I talked about a lot of tools. Project management, you can have videos and pictures and comments, but not everybody wanted to do that. And that was okay too, because we'd still have the basic mapping idea in there. So now that we had a mapping tool to show everybody what the project was and what they were all going to be responsible for, they still needed some way to know what's the problem. Again, we were trying to convince them that these pages had been neglected for a while, and some of that was obvious, but without specific analytics and ways of knowing what people think of these pages, it was still kind of nebulous. So we decided to make sure that they had as much data as possible about the current site. So we used Google Analytics to give every department as much data as possible that was understandable about each page on their site. And we found some interesting pages. There was a page of what every professor grades their students that we didn't even know existed, but it was the most popular one on the site because the students wanted to know who graded the hardest so that they could not take their classes. So when we brought that to people's attention, they said, yeah, maybe we don't want that available to everybody anymore. And then we also did surveys of the faculty with open-ended questions to get an impression of what they liked and didn't like.
So once we got people comfortable, we got them invested in the idea of why we were creating a new website, what pages they needed to work on. We actually needed to sit down and train them because they are going to be the folks who are responsible for their pages. They're going to be doing the updates. They're going to be creating the initial pages. So we did an overall training. We demoed the CMS, showed them how easy it was to use, and then we set up individual appointments with each department or several people from a particular department to show them hands-on. This is how you create a page. This is how you move content around. This is how you do this and that. We also wanted to create something for them that they could go back to look at, because again, they're going to be working on this all summer. We're not going to be there all the time. They may be working on it from home. They can access our CMS from their, on the web, their home computers, and a lot of the faculty will be working from home. They don't tend to come around as much in the summer. So they needed to have something they could access any time of day that would give them some guidance. So we created a wiki instruction manual using DBWorks. Just going to show you that quickly. So just really basic. We decided to keep it as simple as we could, just to make it user-friendly. Because again, we have people who really aren't that tech-savvy, who are starting to get interested in making their own pages, but maybe a little bit hesitant to use something too complex. We created a manual, which is step-by-step guides, and then a style guide. So the manual is how do you get content into the site. The style guide was what kind of content can you put up there, and how does that content need to be set. So just to give you an idea.
Again, we did have documentation about the CMS to distribute to faculty, or to staff and faculty, but we found that sometimes it wasn't as clear as we wanted it to be, and we wanted something we could modify and respond to specific issues or respond to something that came up. The same question would come up all the time in our training, so we were able to adapt this manual specifically to the needs of the various staff and faculty.
So we put in lots of screenshots, step-by-step instructions, and we're able to keep adding to this manual as we get new components to put on the site. You know, our IT folks are still building some things that we had on our wish list that we would like the website to be able to do. So as they issue those new components to us, we can put up new step-by-step directions for how to incorporate those. And then again, as Ben said, if people have questions and something wasn't clear, we can go back and revise it very quickly. We don't have to worry about making sure everybody has the most up-to-date manual. If they can access it on the web, it's up to date. Our plan is that we do have a few people who would like hard copy manuals. So once this is pretty much set, we are going to print out copies for those folks who prefer to have something in hand while they're working on the website. But for now, we found that this was a good resource, a way for people to keep going in there, taking a look. They can also comment on it, so if something doesn't make sense, they can go ahead and be like, I'm not really sure what you mean by step 3. And then we can go ahead and adjust that. So it's a nice interactive way for the training to continue once they've left the computer lab and gone back to their own office.
So as far as future tools, we're skipping to this because we don't necessarily have lessons learned yet. This project's not over. This is a trip to California. We're about in Utah or something. I don't know. We're getting there. It's a summer project, and we're hoping to be done by the end of the summer. But so we didn't have specific things that we've learned yet that are kind of finalized. But there are a few tools that we're hoping to implement still in this project or in future projects that are similar. We didn't use as many cloud-based apps as I wanted. My Domo obviously lives in the cloud, but we certainly could have made better use of Google Drive and things like that, Dropbox. Screencasting and video tutorials would have been an even better way to directly deliver the trainings to some faculty and staff who couldn't make it, or to make something more permanent so that they could see a demo. And we might still implement those. I know Zhang and Camtasia are very easy to use for that purpose. And then video conferencing, again, for those kinds of trainings with faculty who are visiting somewhere but are still responsible for parts of the site. There are a few apps we talked about.
Right. Even something simple as Join Me. Somebody calls me, they're working from home, they're looking at a screen. I can't remember where I was supposed to click to add an image. I can share my screen with them, talk to them over the phone, and show them this is exactly where you need to click, and then they can go back and do it. So something is, it's free, it's very quick, but it's a way for people who are off campus to get the same sort of training and support that they would get if they were there in person.
Any questions?
Well, we have a question for you. Has anybody else worked on a digital initiative and used some tools that we haven't talked about that you think maybe we should try to incorporate in our next project?
We are well past this because the Public Affairs Department handled the CMS change at Chicago Kent, but we are finding that Google Sites, now that we have Google Apps, is really, really key for doing internal documentation. So as we move forward, we're using Google Docs and we're using Google Sites, and that's really helpful when you have things where you want to control who can edit it, but you want to make sure that anybody technically could edit it, because, especially Google Docs is more like editing in Word. It's
Right.
definitely not that intimidation of I'm editing a website. If you're working on that for documentation, you can lock it down, and you can have docs that appear in sites and, kind of control who has access that way.
Yeah, specifically for content, most of the departments are planning to just copy and paste the current content into Word and then back out, or something similar to that. to the new website. So Google Docs is a great solution for that. I'm not sure even something like Google Docs, we get some resistance from some of the staff on whether they want to use it. But again, if we can get the majority adoption of things like that, we can probably implement. So that's very helpful.
I have 2 questions. The first, which content management system did you decide to go with for your new website?
We used Adobe CQ5.
And,
That was a university-wide decision. That wasn't.
and did you, before setting out to rebuild a website, define the mission of your website?
That was something that we struggled with in the very beginning. And one thing with involving university IT, they had done these website builds for the undergraduate liberal arts and sciences, the business school, a lot of other schools. So their focus was always, this is a marketing site. We're looking at prospective students, and then we kind of had to go back and we're like, no, but guys, we got like 750 current students. They use the site too. We have to make sure that we're meeting their needs and the needs of the department. So there was a little bit of push and pull between the two of us trying to figure out how to meet how to get a happy medium. So one thing we ended up doing was, while it's mostly a marketing site, the homepage anyway, links that we have for staff and faculty and administration, we put into the footer so that they are accessible from the homepage, but they're not right in the faces of people who are coming to the site for other purposes.
So a follow-up question.
Sure.
Do you have a portal internet system for your faculty, staff, students, and alumni, or are you directing everyone to your public website for all of the content with no internet environment?
Well, right now, there's a portal for some functions, but for most of the staff stuff that is law school specific, we have to direct them to go to our website. But the university-wide stuff, there are portals for faculty and students to handle some of that.
And we are building some password-protected pages in SharePoint that we will be linking to, just because that seemed to be the best workaround for now. We may come up with a better solution in the future, but at this point, that's a way for us to keep information behind the firewall that we don't want everybody to see.
Did I understand right that you have faculty who are actually updating content?
I know.
In all seriousness,
Wonders never cease, do they?
how did you get that to happen? Seriously.
Well, it took some doing. Most of the faculty working on it are working on faculty-specific pages. So having a vested interest in it really helped. So they're more willing to help update the faculty profiles, faculty handbook, that sort of thing. So we basically went to the Dean of Faculty Research, and she's the one who's really taking the lead on that.
Yeah, it's not all faculty, just to be clear. It's not. There was a suggestion.
Yes.
Nothing wrong with it. There was a suggestion that we make faculty all be in charge of their own profile pages. And I considered that for less than a second before saying, maybe that's not the best idea if there's nobody overseeing the project. Because I think some faculty would be very excited to actually be the ones to, pump up their profiles and add stuff as it comes in. But we wanted to make sure at least there was a gatekeeper who was really watching all that stuff.
Actually, I'm on the same topic. Do you guys, or have you implemented sort of content control, like who's approving what goes on the public website?
We have kind of a loose structure at this point. So Ben and I are going to have eyes on every page before it goes live. We're using the style manual to sort of make things look a little bit consistent in terms of no italics in the headings. Everybody's using this particular font for this particular size heading for these particular pages. But there are some things in place. The home page basically has to go through university communications. So any images that we use on the big slider, any images that are on our landing pages for each of the departments, those have to be approved by university communications. Other than that, we're kind of leaving it up to the departments to decide what content they want to put on there, and then we'll take a look and make sure that it's consistent and that they're using photos that we have approval for that have already had releases signed and all that sort of stuff.
I would say the hierarchy is pretty shallow. It's Lori and I and one other person from IT who was the current webmaster, been the ones, or now the ones responsible for the final say and the rubber stamping, but that's one reason we've been working on streamlining the web pages so that we don't have a lot to work with.
So I'm actually going through the same process, and my question for you is, how are you handling content that you potentially put in ePress, but it's not in ePress yet, but yet you have to put it somewhere on your site. So are you statically maintaining that on your site until ePress is up? Or are you?
Well, we don't have too much that's actually on the current site that will be moved over to ePress. There are a few things like the student newsletter that they send on every week, the Gallup Gazette. They have the archives up there on the current site, and I think at this point, since we are switching over the end of the summer, our goal is to just not move that over to the new site, or move it over to the new site, just move it into Digital Commons when we're ready for that portion.
What kind of content are you talking about specifically?
Well, publications, things like that. So faculty on their faculty profile page like to show recent works, and so so for now, because we don't have everything in Digital Commons yet, we're going to have to statically publish that out, and then as soon as we start moving all of it in, then we're going to start ingesting it from Digital Commons.
We didn't have too much issue with that because we were already using the Scholarly Works module from ePress before we got the digital repository. So a lot of faculty publications are already in there, the faculty's already updating those, so it's not quite as much of an issue for us.
And then are you guys streamlining the design look between?
We're trying to, yeah. Right now, they look a little bit different, but we're trying to make it look as seamless as possible. Like things like the WordPress site and even our LibGuide, we want to make sure that it looks like you're on the same page throughout.
So we're trying to do consistent branding. Unfortunately, some of the things we started the digital repository project, we weren't aware that the website is on the horizon. So you start to make it look like the old website to try to maintain consistency, and then halfway through have to sort of retool and make it look like something that's not even been created yet, which was a challenge.
We finished about a year ago, Roasters and website design. One suggestion that I would make is that people tend to get complacent when the new site comes up, and getting the process in for continuing to keep your content updated is kind of important.
Yeah, we've been aware of the issue with people not updating once it's up, and we've been making sure that it's in everybody's head that this is not a done deal once it's up. But we will certainly welcome strategies anybody has for keeping people involved down the line. But at this time, the best we can do is make sure that the process is in place so that we know who's responsible for each page, so that if there is a problem, we know who to go to who has to help.
I'm actually dealing with some issues. We're doing ours in Drupal 7, and I'm the program guy on the IT side. And we're building in the page responsibility and a content exploration table into each page, so that the page has a person or position's name associated with that content, and then a timeline. And then someday, when I have some free time, I'm going to then take that data, because it's already been built into every page as the pages are being built, and then write an email system that looks at the pages on Friday and picks out that person's name, and if the 6 months has passed, or the 3 months, or whatever the refresh period was, send them an email and send the administrator a list of all the pages that need to be reviewed.
Okay, let me know when you're done, and we'll just hire you to do it.
You got to be careful of turnover on that.
I know, that's why we're identifying positions, and I got to build a position to email relationship tree, and that's where
Well, thank you so much.
Excuse me, excuse me.
Sorry.